We are live on YouTube, and now we're gonna go trying to get live on Facebook also. We're gonna start our podcast soon. We are live on YouTube. We're trying live on Facebook as we speak. Facebook has causing us some issues. But there we are, live on Facebook also. For those who are watching on Facebook, it will work pretty good. But if you do want better quality video and audio, just click the YouTube link, and it would be a little bit more quality. So thanks everyone for tuning in our podcast today. 12 noon here in Ormond Beach, Florida. Today we're going to talk a little bit about GMOs versus whole foods. We have some experts on GMOs, and we will do a whole podcast on that, but we're going to get a little bit into GMOs today. Then we're going to make the GMOs and, the COVID mortality rate. And the most part of today, we want to focus on community immunity. And that's why we have our community advocate here, Mitch Booth. Welcome, Mitch.
Hi, Doc.
We know each other.
We go back.
We go back a while. You've been here before me, yes. I've been here since 97, so 23. But Mitch has been in this community being an advocate for basically whole unadulterated food as a medicine for over 31 years. And so a little bit of background on Mitch. Is obviously the owner of Love Wholefoods Market and Cafe, which actually was the first Whole Food store in Florida based on the old standards, right?
That's correct.
What year did you open?
Opened in 91.
1991.
Right. When 90, we did a whole year of pre-planning to do it right.
To start it right.
Right. Our first location is where Talbot's is in the Trail Shopping Center.
Okay.
That was the first location.
And now you got two great locations in Ormond Beach and Port Orange. You also have 2 degrees from the University of Michigan. He's certified biokinesiologist, also certified 3-in-1 practitioner. But again, most importantly, 31 years experience and being a nutritional educator and public speaker, basically. So welcome. We're going to talk a little bit. First, we talk a little bit about those GMOs, and then we go into the community immunity. So Mitch, most developed nations, they consider GMOs to be unsafe. And those nations have significant restrictions and actually outright ban the production and the sale of GMOs. Now, GMOs are allowed, obviously, in the United States and Canada, and now they're in over 60% of all our foods. They contain GMOs. The problem is that these genetically modified, they call it organisms, but foods and products, that they are, number one, untested, they're unlabeled, and they're unsafe. And so from my point of view, that looks like a great experiment on our people that didn't get any consent or have no knowledge about it. What do you say about that?
Everything you said, it's absolutely true. It just, the Monsanto, which is a company that all of the viewers are familiar with, was in the forefront of doing biogenetic testing, engineering, taking advantage of the Genome Project, the Human Genome Project. And obviously, their incentive was to make money. And that is where science really has its problem. There's good science, there's prosta science, and then there's just outright bad science. Good science is where we study to find out the truth on what either a pharmaceutical or let's say a nutraceutical. Everybody knows about turmeric now, everyone. So we can study that for the good of humanity, or we can deal with science that involves making it easier for farmers to be able to do their agriculture without having to be inconvenienced with like getting rid of weeds.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so what did Monsanto develop? They had a product which again the viewers are familiar with. It's called glyphosate. Glyphosate was originally patented as an antibiotic. Its first FDA certification in the 80s was as an antibiotic. It didn't do very well with humans, but Monsanto discovered that it was particularly good with certain pests, and in particular weeds. And so glyphosate has now grown to be the largest weedicide, herbicide used in the world. But what the viewers need to understand is that glyphosate is very democratic. It kills everything. If it's alive, it kills it. In the agricultural world, that's great, because then, again, if you genetically modify, let's say, corn, let's just keep it simple. If we have Roundup ready corn, it means that they've genetically spliced in the genome sequence of the corn the ability not to be poisoned by the glyphosate where everything else is.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful if you're looking for the bottom line to be able to eliminate having to use a lot of other other techniques to get rid of the weeds. But we all need to understand that when you eat that corn, you are getting not only the residue of the herbicide that's sprayed in the field, that's on the corn itself, but also the genetic modification that's altered the protein and the carbohydrates.
And we have no control over that because that DNA can go anywhere, modify anything. It's unknown, and it goes from the corn to our livestock, from our livestock to us, or from the corn straight to us, and even ends up in the environment and the water, etc. So
and then the battle is the internet. And so everyone can go and Google, and then we will find out that brilliant scientists, true scientists, doing the good science, like Dr. Stephanie Seneff, 2 PhDs from MIT, you'll see these websites that attack her, where she's written 17 peer-reviewed publications, more than half of which are dedicated to the dysbiosis caused by the genetic modification of the food supply. And you're going to say, well, doesn't the FDA monitor all this? Doesn't the Department of Agriculture? And of course they do. But it's always looking at the details. The studies that are done on GMO foods with human consumption never exceed more than 6 months. Right?
So you don't have the long-term effect.
You don't have any long-term effect. And the insight on that is that these French scientist, his name is Serral, and again, you can Google that, was doing long-term studies, right? It turns out that the tumors don't appear in the lab rats being fed GMO corn until after the 6-month period. You know, that's really interesting, because if we look at another area, especially for the women listening, the initial studies done on synthetic estrogen are all, and now every woman knows about Premarin, right? What were how long were the studies done for efficacy of Premarin before it was introduced not only in the food supply, but as a hormone replacement therapy? And the answer to that is 6 months. Right? So the devil's always there looking to see how is it that the numbers get manipulated, and we're watching that right now with COVID. You know, that the science is only good as the integrity behind it. And I'm very proud, since we're talking about GMOs, the foremost authority being used in the 2,000 cases of glyphosate poisoning, Roundup poison. The trade name is Roundup. Roundup has more than just glyphosate. More toxins. There's more toxins, but the heart of it, when Bayer is being taken to court in California, the heart of it is glyphosate. The foremost authority that is shown in the 4 cases that 4 independent juries, all listening to the data, came to the same conclusion, and that is that glyphosate caused the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the victims.
Very interesting.
And then all of a sudden you get all of these scientists that show up on the internet claiming that we're we're extremists, we're food phobics.
Well, yeah, we expand on that because it's a good point. Because for our viewers, also Monsanto's been around, and it has created in the past, a lot of the worst toxins that we know. I mean, we're talking about Agent Orange, we're talking about aspartame, we're talking about dioxins, DDT, PCBs, of course, pesticides, herbicides. And so each and every time they told us that it was safe, to then find out later it was very detrimental to our health and our environments, right?
I'll just take aspartame as a good example.
Yeah.
The number
Sweetener.
one, the FDA gets more complaints on that ingredient in the food supply than any other single contaminant.
Yeah.
And you would say, if Camp Run-Amok was really worth the money that we were paying their salaries, you'd say, well, I need to put some attention into that,
Yes.
right? But the problem with aspartame is it makes money in the diet. If you see something in the mass market that says diet,
it's in there.
It's either aspartame,
but it was also
or some
developed,
other derivative.
Yeah,
There's other.
it was
names
developed as a biological warfare, no? And then they figured out by accident it was sweet. And what are we going to do? We're not going to kill our enemies. We just put it in our own food supply to kill ourselves, right?
But it causes migraine headaches. Yeah. And with your own work with your own clients, we both know that not only are migraine headaches on the increase, but the other thing that is disturbing about diet sodas is that we consume more diet sodas than any other populations in the G8. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Guess who has the most obesity? If there was a correlation between, and I might add that there are other elements.
Sure.
We could take another thing, osteoporosis. And, we consume more osteoporosis drugs than any other. Well, let's just look at drugs. Yeah. Of all the pharmaceutical drugs created in the world, right? And they're created mostly in China, by the way, and India, right? Many of them are designed for osteoporosis. If the correlate made any sense, because we consume more, things like
all the toxins and the acidity. It's the acidity and the lack of minerals that leaches our bones and our muscles. That's why we're short of calcium and magnesium. And
of course, that plays into the dysbiosis that happens when we're gonna move. That'll be a good segue. But again, the common sense would say if these drugs really were effective, and glyphosate is a drug, the Roundup was originally approved as an FDA antibiotic. Didn't work very well, but it is an antibiotic. Yeah. But the key element to it wasn't until they gene spliced and married the two together that it became this ubiquitous herbicide used in the world. But again, if it was safe, then we should see we shouldn't see what we're seeing in the landscape. And what have I seen in the 30 years? I'm seeing autoimmune diseases that don't make any sense. Mm-hmm. We have Crohn's disease. 30 years ago, there were a few people with celiac. I remember that. Mm-hmm. And I terrible. But now we're seeing, now they call it irritable bowel syndrome. And then, of course, if the irritable bowel syndrome doesn't get resolved, what does it downregulate? You get Crohn's disease. Yeah. And if you don't get the Crohn's disease resolved, what happens? You got celiac disease. Yeah. or all of the above.
It's just a worsening of the same issue.
Right. And then, of course, the only tool 30 years ago was corticosteroids. Yeah. And then that's worth a whole discussion. But it isn't just the autoimmune diseases of the gut. It's rheumatoid arthritis in women in their 30s.
Well, it's everything. And I always tell the listeners, the cause of all this is toxemia. It's the buildup of toxins in our body. And if we have more toxins in our body than our body possibly can eliminate, then they're floating around and they're causing free radical damage and systemic inflammation. Right. And it's the cause of everything, right?
Not drinking any water.
Not drinking any water. Now, 80% of these GMOs that are grown worldwide, they are engineered to be herbicide resistant. And the funny part is that since the GMOs came on the market, that now we actually have the use of herbicides didn't double or triple or quadruple. It's 16 times more herbicide use since the GMOs come on the market.
And what's the Department of Agriculture solution? We changed the standards as to how much herbicide was quote unquote safe, right?
Yeah.
To
We just
address
make 'em higher,
exactly what we said. And then suddenly that old standard isn't applying here. We're going to double it. And what happens? We're seeing cancer now in third world countries on an order that is closely matching. They're all closely matching.
Yes.
Because the food that the people are consuming are having the same impact on human physiology.
Well, the bottom line is, though, it started in the 80s already with L-tryptophan, which was genetically engineered, and so now all these GMOs, what it means is there's basically a strange genetic DNA, put into all our foods. And what people don't understand is there's no studies, there's no proof, because we can't control it, on what damage it all causes, what consequences they have for our for humans and for the environment. And they don't have to be tested; they're considered safe. But we talked about a few of the rat studies and stuff, big tumors, but usually after the 6 months. I read a lot of studies on rats where they gave herbicide-resistant soybeans to rats and female rats, and all the offsprings, they were stunted in growth and sterile. Okay, and so those are just many of the examples on we have no clue what it's doing. But the problem with what's happening, Mitch, is that that the consequences are endless, but they are also irreversible. Meaning we put those gene mutations out there and we can't take that back. So what is it that we can do about it?
That's a good question. So on November 28th in 2018, I had the privilege I had Dr. Seneff come and give a lecture at, as you know, you've given talks at Love Wholefoods on that new front porch that we had. She was one of the first to make that resource available to the community. We had 200 people. We had to open the doors, basically, because people knew that this is an issue that they wanted to know about. So I said to Dr. Seneff, what we're discussing, we want to leave it on a positive note. And so what was the one thing that she made sure? The number one was to do a product called Restore, which is a lignin product that closes the junctures that get ripped open by exposure to the glyphosate.
Okay.
And so it is reversible. That was her number one. Number two was once you close the junctures, knowing that the barrier in the gut is only one layer of epithelial cells for the whole osmosis of bringing nutrients into the blood and also getting toxins out of the blood.
Semi-permeable membrane.
It's a semi-permeable, but when the glyphosate erodes that, then what's happening is that you're getting gags. You're getting those, that's a medical term for those organisms, and it can be parasites, it can be bacteria,
viruses,
and viruses into the bloodstream that should have been blocked if the juncture was there. So Restore
because the toxins are ruining or destroying that membrane.
That's correct.
To hold them out.
And sometimes it's called interstitial erosion. Yeah, fancy medical term.
Sure, to confuse us all.
But the key is that we do have a product that's it's safe enough for children.
Yeah.
And the second is that once you close the gaps, then spray paint the interior of that wall with probiotics.
Yes.
And of course, 30 years ago, I have to tell you, what we've seen change in the landscape of self-healing has been phenomenal in the three decades that we've been open. We were selling probiotics 3 decades ago, and the medical establishment was telling,
ignored them. Yeah.
You can get whatever you need in a yogurt, a Dannon yogurt with 2,000 calories of pureed jam or whatever. But also it's the yogurt is pasteurized because it's demanded by the Department of Agriculture. So whatever little amount of bacteria was
is left. So
and now we have a whole new medical specialty in that 3 decades of not only understanding that biome, that human biome, but we now have what I really hope is going to be a new opportunity for the whole community or the people listening that if you're suffering from chronic conditions, all revolving around inflammation, all going back to inflammation,
Sure.
that you're not going from specialist to specialist and you end up they throw a dart and say, well, let's try this drug.
You got to address the cause.
And know that our bodies were created perfect. All you need to do is find the recipe that brings into balance, because that's the most important.
And then the body can heal itself.
And the body will heal itself.
Yes, that's correct. So besides the product that you're talking about, I think one of the most important things that you could do is what we're doing right now, is educating the people about GMOs, so we can not buy them. We can try to avoid them, at least if they're labeled. If they're unlabeled, it's going to be hard. But that's really what we need to do, is education.
We've been doing that for 30 years.
Yeah, if we don't buy them, then they won't survive. So that's key.
We rehabbed that whole front end of the main campus.
I know, I'll be back soon.
And with air conditioning, by the way.
Yeah, very good.
But we did it with what I called continuing community education.
Now, before we go into the community immunity, I want to finish up our GMO section, because there's many people that are pro GMOs, and that's because those big biotech companies, they use a deceptive language to try to embrace the apparent goodness that could come from GMOs. And one of those things that they put out there is that GMOs could be the solution for world hunger. And obviously that's just propaganda to promote their agenda, because there's no proof at all that GMO farming would help hunger in the world. What do you have to say about that?
Senef addressed it, but you can, again, the beauty of the internet is that there's a whole research areas that show that we're not running out of food.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in the United States,
we have a surplus.
We have a surplus.
Yeah.
Certainly in the EU, there's a surplus, but we have areas in Africa where there are famines, there's drought. What we have is a distribution problem. That's a major difference. And I might also add, how is it that the tin horn dictator in North Korea maintains his power?
Yeah.
He controls the food supply.
Yeah.
I mean, you use scarcity as a tool, as a political tool to subjugate.
It's what Monsanto's trying to do, is to really control the seed and the food supply. Now, the idea, or the false idea that GMOs may help in the world hunger, indeed is false. You can do your research, but when I did my research, it's very clear that when the research is done, number one, there's no increase in yield in food with GMOs
they're decreasing
compared to conventional farming. So there is no more food. And the way it's explained is, if we have conventional farming, if we have crops, there's space between the crops. If there would be a need to increase our food supply, we just put a different crop in those empty spaces. And it's much more effective than any GMO food. And actually, Monsanto even agreed that there's no increase in yield. Number two, there's no decrease in pesticides either, obviously, right? And so it has been shown that conventional farming or other farming techniques are more effective, in increasing food supply if needed to be. But again, we have a surplus here in the Western countries and the United States of America. The other thing I want to point out is that these biotech companies or agro-industrial companies, they don't give AF about our farmers.
They are international corporations. Yes. They have no allegiance to any one country.
And the two good examples that I wanted to share with our viewers, and then we go into the immunity community here, is number one, they have a patent on those seeds. And here we have our small organic farmers. And if that seed happens to flow over the fence, which the organic farmers don't want, they actually get sued for it. Monsanto has a budget of over $10 million each and every year to investigate and then sue those small farmers because they have patented seeds on their property. We just were blown over from the next door farmer, basically. So that's just totally disgusting, number one. Number two, which most people don't know, is the seeds that they sell to, especially African farmers, it's the ones that need them for the food, right? They are sterile. Okay, so these seeds, when these African farmers grow their crops, they cannot get seeds from the crops. Those crops or plants cannot reproduce. So these farmers are now forced to, every season, every year, to buy more seeds. So they're not helping the farmers. They're making sure they can't grow enough food, and they have to make sure they have to buy the seeds, which those farmers cannot afford.
When I worked with the Hartford Current, I studied the first GMO experiments being done at the University of Connecticut. And Monsanto had a name for them. They were called Terminator seeds.
That's what they are.
And that's what they are.
Yes. So as the largest organic grocery store in Volusia, Flagler County here, how do you keep your foods GMO free?
Well, let's talk about organic.
Yeah.
Organic is traditional foods that have been traditionally farmed. It is a legal definition. It is not like the word natural. The word natural means nothing.
Yeah.
Organic is a standard in which the farmer raises, let's just look at the soil, free of herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides, using traditional methods to control all of those conditions. And then they are certified, maybe not every crop, but they are certified by the Department of Agriculture to be organic and free of those particular components. And so we introduced organic produce 30 years ago. And then, and as a good friend said, so we were whack jobs in the 30s. We were foodaholic or foodies in the, in the 90s. Then it became sort of chic.
Chic to have a high-end something.
Right. If you had a discretionary income, that it was, they didn't believe in it, but it was, it was cool.
We always,
and now what we have is even Walmart is selling these products, which is fine. The idea was that we want to produce an economic platform that small independent farmers can do. And that's the other thing I wanted to emphasize. We supply our customers with the largest source of not only organic, but sourced right here from Barberville, right out here in Samsula, and I'm very proud. Yeah. So we get into a system where these small farmers can survive. And of course, the viewers don't know, but we've been open through this whole COVID 7 days a week. And so we've been giving money to make sure that these farmers
could survive.
The PPP that was being supplied, much of it went to large industrial farming operations. One of the victims that isn't being discussed is the small independent farmers that virtually go from one crop season to another crop season.
Hey, Lowe's and Walmart are open, but the small businesses had to close, right? Doesn't make any sense.
It didn't, then I might also add the healthiest of the local restaurants were the ones that were selling local source produce, right? Or locally raised beef, right? They were the ones that aren't going to make it. Yeah. The ones who got the support were the chain.
Sure, the ones that didn't need the support, most likely.
And then also we're using ingredients that we know are identified. I mean, there are only 3 restaurants that I can even think that come close to the standards that we use at both of our cafes, both in Port Orange, on Taylor Road and the one.
What would you say to people that learned a little bit more about GMOs? They're going to look into it. There's actually good DVDs out there too to watch about GMOs and decide to avoid GMOs. What would be their course of action? Just buying organic foods would eliminate the possibility of GMOs in foods. Is that correct?
That's the easiest.
Yeah. Because it's certified and it doesn't allow the GMO. So that's the easiest way. Right. Because we know that many foods are not labeled for GMOs.
And I'm just going to say, if it's not labeled, or let's go back to another. If you're in the mass market and you're buying a product that says cane sugar, if it doesn't say organic, then you know that it's not cane sugar, it's high fructose corn syrup, unless it's certified.
What about the products
remembering that high fructose corn syrup is a commodity, and we make tons of it, primarily because of the ethanol link to the fuel supply. So it's mandated that 10% of all of the fuel potential of a tank of gasoline has to be 10% ethanol. That's all genetically modified
what
corn.
if I see a product and it says GMO free? Can I trust that product?
That if it's a brand that you trust, it all comes down
to the brand.
It comes down to
because it's not a certified term necessarily.
GMO does not it could be GMO free, and it might be GMO free, but the safety net is organic. It may not. We have a few products, but very few, only because we trust the source.
Yeah.
But the let's say the grain is not. Let's say a corn chip.
Mm-hmm.
The corn chip is GMO free, meaning that it was made from a traditional source of corn.
Yeah.
But it's not organic.
But
so it might have some other contaminant.
I got you. So that's the difference. That's important to know. So if you want to be safe, gotta buy organic.
In the bottom line,
that's the bottom line. Yeah. Now you stated, Mitch, that GMO could be a major underlying factor in COVID-19 mortality. Explain that to our viewers.
The best thing I can do, if everyone's got a pencil and paper, go to Seneff, SENEFF. At C as in Charlie, sail, like a sailboat, .edu, rather than take up a lot of time to explain how the glycine, the word glyphosate, is based around an amino acid called glycine. Mm-hmm. But just like with aspartame, which is built around an amino acid called aspartic acid, mm-hmm. right? They're not the same. It's been genetically modified. So it's not aspartic acid, it's aspartame. Right?
The body can't recognize.
And well, the body is struggling, or the body gets fooled and it thinks it's glycine and it's not. Mm-hmm. And then there's a metabolic response. And so what happens in that metabolic confusion mm-hmm. is that we get a nutrient depletion, especially of zinc and also of manganese. Yeah. And manganese plays a critical role in about 4 dozen enzymatic processes in the body. And those enzyme processes are what detoxify. Yeah. But if you're not, if the glyphosate has disrupted that, and you're not using, let's say, methionine mm-hmm. as a critical element of neutralizing the toxins, what happens? You circulate them again.
Yeah.
Sound like rheumatoid arthritis.
You're not excreting them. You're continuously
recycling. As Bernie is, I had the privilege of working with Bernie Siegel at Yale New Haven, and he just said it's like going to the bathroom. If you're not eliminating every day, you're recycling yesterday's waste.
Yes.
Or
true, right? If you think about it.
And you want a recipe for growing old real fast?
Yeah.
There you go.
There it is. Now, you've been in the community for 3 decades, and so you've been coping with this COVID-19 the last 2 months, but you have been, because you've been here so long, been exposed to many viral threats over that time.
Right. I mean, my journey started back with my sister in 1976. Nobody remembers the first H1N1 because we have a hard time wrapping our brains around all of these fancy medical or chemical terms. Swine flu had an interesting side effect for those to a major proportion of Northern European genetics, and that was that it caused virally induced type 1 diabetes. And my sister was one of those victims. She was 28 years old, healthy, no history of diabetes in the family.
And there it is.
She had no preconditions. Mm-hmm. I need to be politically correct.
Not on this show.
She believed in taking she did the vaccine.
Well, that's another
and the end result was that she got the swine flu in spite of the vaccine, as many people know, was not particularly effective. And by the way, that happened with the President of the United States, Gerald Ford, and nobody remembers. Well, that's where H1N1 started for me.
Yeah.
But in 2007, we had SARS. 2009, we had MERS. And the S in both of those stands for severe, or the R in both, and the S is severe respiratory infections. COVID obviously falls into this, but the major difference with this one is the cytokine shower. Some call it a cascade.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that over the period of the last 25 years, the use of antibiotics and so many other medications have weakened our immune systems, leaving us vulnerable. It's almost like a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Especially what we've seen in the data, which is older people, especially the World War II generation, my father being one of them, they were all smokers.
Yeah.
And
lungs.
We're talking about lungs. And then of course the other link, and I want to focus on how to rebuild the immunity, but all these there was this, why was it attacking young people?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't do a profile on lifestyle of what these young people were doing. But anybody in the audience remember all those ads for vaping?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, funny, you don't see anymore.
And they end up on the ventilators too, right?
They were on ventilators before the outbreak.
Yeah, and now they're not there anymore. Now they're COVIDs, right?
Right, and we won't even talk about the shenanigans that they're doing with
the
numbers. Let's look at one of the things that is very controversial. Well, not controversial, but what I find amazing is that we're being encouraged by the scientists to sort of just hang in there, baby, until the vaccine's there.
Yeah.
Well, there are two things that I want the viewers to think about. I don't like when science goes pedal to the metal. That they come up with a vaccine. There isn't a person listening to this podcast that's not going to say, I'll pass on this one and I'll wait and see what happens to my next door neighbor.
Yeah.
But the other aspect of this, is there anything that we can do
now?
Yeah. Come on in, everybody. You get it. This is a sheet that I handed out on our 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
No sugar, no sugar. I have another sheet, by the way, that's dedicated to sugar. It's 50 ways that sugar.
There's so much educational information and pamphlets and books at Mitch's store that's very valuable.
Including yours.
Including my books,
right?
Yeah.
Including yours. So, but the point is that one thing I know about boomers is it has to fit on one sheet of paper.
Yeah.
The other one is that it needs some graphics.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just make it simple. There it is, guys. Sugar and refined carbohydrates. By the way, pizza, we're going to see an incredible.
Well, let's not talk about dairy and pizza.
We want to talk about pizza. But it lists here those things that weaponize the immune system. What is that? Zinc. This whole controversy with hydrochloroquine.
And then zinc and Z-Pack, that's a trio there.
Right. Except that do the viewers know that if you do quercetin, which is a vitamin C that specifically goes to the lungs, right? But hydrochloroquine is called an ionophore. It's a transporter of zinc. So if you do the hydrochloroquine,
that's why they add zinc to it. Yeah.
But it's the zinc that goes through the mitochondria of the virus.
Yes.
Penetrates that defensive shell. Some people call it a biofilm because the virus wants to preserve itself.
Sure.
The
zinc is what destroys it.
The zinc goes into the RNA, DNA, rips apart the helical, and guess what it does? It kills the virus. Now, I'm not advocating hydrochloroquine is an anti-malarial drug.
No.
I'm just saying
it's a good vehicle for the zinc to get into the virus.
But we need to look at what the type is. And one of the things that the creators of hydrochloroquine, which is quinine, by the way, the quinine comes from the bark of a Amazonian tree, right? It's the source of the quinine was a natural source, but its effectiveness is as an ionophore. But one of the most effective ionophores is quercetin. Doesn't cost very much more than standard vitamin C, but you want to outdo the president of the United States?
Yeah.
Just take quercetin and zinc. And by the way, it didn't seem to make any difference what chelated the zinc. You could get zinc oxide, which is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Or you can get the fancy Hans Nieper orotates. I like the orotates, but it's a matter of money. We're talking pennies. And if you combine that with omega-3 fatty acids, what do omega-3 fatty acids? You know what it does. You can't swim and be effective as a swimmer if you're not oxygenating your blood. That's one of the key functions of fish oil.
And it's also an anti-inflammatory at the same time.
It absolutely is. It shuts off that cytokine production.
Now that's very great information. Quercetin, zinc, right? Omega-3s. So what other nutraceuticals or phytobotanicals have you seen being successful over those 3 decades when we're talking about boosting immunity and fighting a virus like COVID-19? Is there anything else?
I've been doing a ton of research and going back to the Spanish flu epidemic.
Yeah.
My favorite is Andrographis. Andrographis is a Indian subcontinent tropical plant that in 1918, when India was impacted with the Spanish flu, but nobody reads about them because they were like little brown people, and we were here fighting, for our lives in the Nobody knew that millions of people were dying over there in the Indian subcontinent, except for the ones that went to Ayurvedic medicine that were probably, wealthier.
Yeah.
And in Ayurvedic medicine for respiratory, which the Spanish flu was also a coronavirus, was also a coronavirus, that they used an herb called Andrographis. And I can only say, for any person listening that wants a wonderful way to either do as a preventative, or if you think that you've been exposed, come into the store. We have Terry Limrod, the man that introduced turmeric to the United States, high fructose, St. John's wort.
Yeah.
He introduced glucosamine sulfate. This is a man that is amazing.
Being on the forefront. Yeah.
And he has, only because his BCM 95 curcuminoid extract from India, he was listening to the Ayurvedic medicine people who were saying, well, this crop over here is just as good as the one with the turmeric.
Yeah.
And so he has one that is so good, it's a 65-page book.
You gave it to me. I got it.
And what's the side effect of Andrographis? Oh, it balances blood sugar.
That's a bad side effect, isn't it?
It for asthmatics, it's particularly effective here in the mold capital of the United States.
So it's a good preventative, it's good for treatment, and it's obviously, unlike drugs, there's never any side effects.
Unless they're in the odd chance that you might be allergic to it. I'm not saying we've been selling it. I've not had a single person bring it back. That's interesting in its own.
In its own, for sure. What lifestyle changes, Mitch, would you like to see in our community?
Exercise. I mean, it is the trigger. It's the catalyst.
Yeah, we had Tasso on from Bodies a few weeks ago, and obviously we talked about exercise, and it doesn't have to be, and you probably agree, it doesn't have to be organized sports, so you don't have to go to the gym. What we're talking about is movement, because movement means oxygenation and circulation. So we want to get all the nutrients and the oxygen to each and every cell, and we want to get all the waste products out of the body. So don't be sedentary. You just got to move, whether it's walking, dancing. You just got to be busy, get up and do stuff. And that's what, is that what you mean with exercise? Movement, right?
Yeah,
it's simple.
Right.
Yeah.
Dance. You had a great guest that was Councilwoman May, who was a dancer. Dance is wonderful. We've all been restricted with this shelter in place, and I can only say that I've developed whole new ways of exercising that I never thought of, because my trainer, don't tell
Tasso that you're going somewhere else.
I hope he's not. I love Tasso. We did Fitness Friday.
You guys have done so many good things in the community together.
But the key is anything that gets the heartbeat raised, and you're going to get a benefit from it. And then the other one is, guess what's in water? It's H2O, guys.
Oxygen,
right? It's oxygen. Now, we do sell oxygenated waters. I just happen to like that particular water because it comes from an artesian well in the Smoky Mountains on the Cherokee Reservation. Yeah. So there's no industry. It's ground up Smoky Mountains.
Very good.
Awesome. I like that.
how do you suggest, or how do we avoid basically fear that's paralyzing our cognitive ability to solve problems like this?
Well, again, go back to oxygen, and I'm worried about the hypoxia of everyone wearing the mask. It's even, whether or not you decide that you want to do the mask, the having your face covered
increases the viral load.
I mean, I don't get into the discussion. I like doing the thieves oil, which again goes back to the plague in the what was that in the, well, there were a couple of plagues, but the big one in the 1400s. Thieves oil was a combination of aromatic herbs, cinnamon, oregano. These are things that we know also, if we take them internally, have antiviral properties.
What about echinacea also?
Echinacea's, Terry again has a therapeutic echinacea, not the one that's used for boosting the immune system. It's Echinacea purpurea, and that particular genus goes through the blood-brain barrier and works very much like a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. But it's not a drug, so you don't get to the side effects that we know happen with SSRIs. But it gives you that release, so you don't become paralyzed with the fear that that this virus is going to get you.
Yes.
Which is incredibly immune suppressant.
You mentioned oil, and what I wanted to say before we go and finish up with our last questions and stuff here is that, during my whole lifetime being an advocate, just like Mitch, you always have, and sometimes they're intelligent people, but they call us quackeries, they call us oil snakesmen and things like that. And it becomes very funny to me when they say that. And the reason why I think it's very funny is because the drugs they are promoting or the things that they are taking usually only have one study done by the beneficiary. Like you said, short term, we really don't have any safety on those. And what they don't realize is that, the ingredients that we've been talking about, echinacea, St. John's wort, vitamin C.
There's anyone out there that
thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed, published research articles worldwide, and yes, also on PubMed, but you just don't want to look at them. Okay, so it's mind-boggling that they say that we're quackeries and that we're using snake oil to sell to people. No, this is health. This is Mother Nature. And if you want research, there's so much more on the stuff that we're talking about that you ever would dream of. You just are blind and you're unwilling to look at your PubMed for those studies. I just had to get it out, Mitch.
The truth will set you free.
Yeah.
But you need to be your own advocate. You need to do what your parents and my parents took for granted, which was critical thinking.
Yeah.
And just decide that just because the Mayo Clinic, well, I'll give you a good example with Terry Naturally's BCM 95. So, and because cancer is a very touchy subject, the BCM 95 is being used at MD Anderson, Moffitt, and Baylor University. Those are the three largest cancer-fighting institutes. The Mayo is studying it, but they haven't implemented it. They're using a nutraceutical derived from turmeric, but it's not turmeric. Yeah. It's a potentiated curcuminoid, the orangey part.
The active ingredient of turmeric.
Right. That not only does it work in increasing survivability during conventional treatment. So we don't make a decision. You do your critical thinking. You want to do chemo and surgery. I'm a big fan of surgery. You got a tumor the size of a grapefruit.
Take it out.
Take it out. That just makes perfect sense. But if you're going to do the chemo and they're talking 6 or 10 treatment sessions, then do the BCM 95 so that you can get more benefit using less chemo.
Yes.
That's why MD Anderson Moffitt
are now incorporating it.
It's and it actually being prescribed as a part of their treatment program.
A lot of listeners also don't realize, I guess, Mitch, that every drug that's ever made in the past, it was something that they were looking at, a plant or a herb or a food in Mother Nature that worked on something. some ancient history, and they said, well, we can't make money on that because you can't make a patent on anything natural. So what they do is they study that plant or herb, find the active ingredient that's responsible for a certain effect, and then try to copy it synthetically in a lab so they can make money on it and patent it. But many times that patent or synthetic portion, right, comes with a lot of side effects because the plant or the herb works synergistically with the other ingredients and components, and also many times have the antidotes to, you know, some of the active ingredients. So it's always a cheap ripoff of Mother Nature anyways, period.
And 60% of all pharmacology derived from Mother Nature. Yes. Almost 60%.
Yeah. I mean, and the rest is all ideas from Mother Nature.
And then if you look at, let's look at the #1 drug prescribed in America, which is levothyroxine, just for those viewing. The #1 drug prescribed, more script written than any other drug. It's not a drug, it's a hormone, but it's by script. Anyone with any intelligence would say that means we got a lot of thyroid problems, or we wouldn't be right when you think of how many prescriptions, how many drugs this country. By the way, we consume 80% of all of the pharmaceuticals produced on the planet. Just FYI.
And that's WHO statistics.
Right, but the issue is that it's levothyroxine based on natural thyroxine, but it's not thyroxine. No. It's levothyroxine.
Yes.
And the difference is
they can patent it, make money at it, but it doesn't work as good because it tricks the body again.
And then eventually the body says, wait a minute. Is that really thyroxine?
Yeah.
You know, it's not a perfect match. And so, because everyone's talking about antibodies, so eventually the body says, wait a minute, is that a virus pretending to be thyroxine?
Yes.
And then the body attacks it. What is that? That's Hashimoto. Yes. That's Hashimoto's disease.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there were a few cases 3 decades ago. It's an epidemic. I don't see the same marshaling of resources to deal with what I consider one of the biggest health threats.
Yes.
Gut dysbiosis and thyroid dysfunction.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a cause of so many conditions and autoimmune diseases. The other thing that I like to tell is about drugs, and this is pure science. That matter, which is drugs, anything synthetic is dead matter. It's not alive. Cannot act. That matter only can be acted upon. So if you look at all the side effects of drugs, many times they're the same: nausea, vomiting, all those types of things. What are they? They are attempts of the body to expel the toxin. That's all. That's what it is. The side effects. That matter cannot act.
Wholefoods has been dedicated to life and happiness and vitality. We sell probiotics. The pharmaceutical, the medical industry, and I'm not opposed. My mother was a World War II military nurse. She literally administered the first antibiotics ever given to humans. And
it saves lives, of course, in those situations.
And I'm going to but it's always that balance, right? That the human body, if you're using antibiotics over and over, week after week, month after month, there's going to be cracks in the dike.
Yeah,
that's our dysbiosis. But antibiotics versus pro-bacteria.
Yes.
And I advocate what we do at Wholefoods. Every sheet that I hand out, on the back of it are all the medical
references.
The references,
yes.
like PubMed.
You always do. Yes.
And then of course the books that we give out, the actual, when we had Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum talking about what our next talk's going to be on, which is diabetes. Who had the highest comorbidity rate with COVID? It was obesity and diabetics and people with lung disease. But the lung is just an extension of the metabolic imbalance.
Let's finish up, Mitch. How do you suggest that we all get ready here for #1, hurricane season, and #2, COVID-20?
Just listen to this wonderful talk, and I have a whole end cap at both stores, one at 1633 Taylor Road in Port Orange, and the other one on 275 Williamson in Ormond, the main campus. We have an end cap. It's called Community Immunity Armory.
Community Immunity Armory.
HQ. And there's the quercetin. There's we didn't even talk about elderberry. Elderberry. It's from the trees that are the elders. That's why it's called
elderberry.
Elderberry, meaning that it's like olives.
And they're very tasty gummies.
Right, but it's like olive oil, which is, again, another weapon that's an omega-6. The omega-3s are all there. They're all in one place.
So you can get all the concise information just coming into the store because it's their immunity community headquarters.
And then if you're living alone, I get it. We've got the cafes open now. On Tuesday, we will have the juice bar. We're going to be full service again. We haven't been doing the juices because we didn't want people to stand around, but we'll be up and running. But you can come and get one serving of curry chicken. You can get one serving of
I like the curry chicken, by the way.
That's really good. And by the way, everything that's in our deli came from the store. We don't have Cisco backing up.
Yeah, sure.
What goes in if you were doing a kale salad with the cranberry, it came from the store.
Yeah.
And then of course we make fresh artisan soups every day, and the secret ingredient, I just need to tell you, it's schmaltzy, but it's low. You know, the people that are working behind there 7 days a week for the last 2 months have shown up for work. I only had 2 workers out of 57 workers that had high risk with their parents and didn't want to take a chance. But I'm real proud of them. They are really heroes.
No, I've always been impressed that they also know the products, they know the food. You can ask them questions, they're educated. And obviously they're very passionate about what they're doing because they're all products of the products.
They've all had their own health issues.
We're all products of the products. Well, thank you so much, Mitch, for joining us. I'm sure we're going to have Mitch on many times. There's so many topics that we can talk about. I always, look up to Mitch. He has a wealth of information. He's been in this industry, much longer than I have. And he really is a true advocate of our community, trying to better the health of everybody in this Volusia Flagler area. So thanks again for being here today.
You bet. Really nice. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
It's just a wonderful opportunity. Anybody that wants, I'm at Ormond in the morning, Port Orange in the afternoon.
Yeah, he's always there too, walking around, answering
Friday.
questions.
I don't have to work on the weekends.
What's the website, Mitch, so they can look it up? For
Love, L-O-V-E, Wholefoods with an S.com.
LoveWholefoods.com. Very easy, and all the locations are
our
there.
menu is up. We got our menus posted now, and all the and then the articles I've written.
The articles, the seminars, everything's there. Go check it out, and let's make our community healthy. Again, always choose health freedom. Over and out. So that's Facebook. Hold on.